Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adero Robinson, and I proudly serve as the Executive Director with City of Columbus. And I want to welcome you to our first edition of Red Jacket Roundtables, which is a series of conversations designed to invite community members to have conversations about what's important in the community and talk about all the good things that are happening with City Year and with other organizations. So today we have a special guest, Natalie Cosgray, who is a second-year AmeriCorps member serving at South High School. How are you doing today, Natalie?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us on our first episode of the Red Jacket Roundtables. Could you just, tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, why you joined City Year, why you came back for a second year? I'm curious to learn more about you.
Sure. Yes. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you and, talk about the work that we do at City Year and at South High. So I'm originally from the Columbus area. I was born here in Columbus and went to elementary school and the first part of middle school in the area. My mom moved us over to Beijing, China in middle school. So that's where I spent my middle school and high school years. And that is really where I got to start my passion for service with the Beijing community. Our school is really involved with a lot of different local organizations there. And then my mom was the elementary principal of our international school there. So I had a lot of tutoring opportunities, coaching opportunities come my way. And so that was kind of the foundation of the start of, where I started to enjoy things that City Year values really greatly. So after, going to college and realizing that the field that I was in, humanitarian aid, was on a hiring freeze during COVID, one of my college roommates told me about City Year, and that's when it clicked with me. And I, did some research and did some interviews and ended up applying to the site with the highest need, which was out in San Jose. So that's where I served my first year. But because of COVID, everything was virtual for most of the year. And it was a challenging year, to be honest. It was hard to kind of see the impact that we were making on the students. A lot of them didn't have adequate internet or even computers and devices to use. So it was challenging in the beginning, but we finally were able to open a pod with a few different students. And after I started seeing the impact that we were making, directly right in front of my eyes, I knew I wasn't finished. I knew I had to come back. And that's when I decided to apply here to Columbus and come back to where I'm originally from and get to know the community here and, give back where I can and promote, educational equity and hang out with the kids around this area.
So you went to college, you went to middle school and high school in Beijing.
Yes, middle school and high school.
You went to college in Beijing as well?
No, I came back to Ohio University for college.
Okay, Ohio University.
Came back to Ohio. Yep. Yeah.
So let me ask you, are you fairly fluent in Chinese?
I wouldn't say I'm fluent. I would say I'm conversational. So I can have some conversations, get around in a taxi, order some food. I've definitely lost a lot of it since I was there because it's been several years now, but you really had to learn the language to get around there. And that's something that I love dearly and, take with me wherever I go.
Oh, that's cool. Got the international connection.
Yeah.
So when you came to City Year, starting in San Jose,
yeah.
I know it was in a virtual space, but did you work with younger kids, middle school or high school kids?
Yep. So I was at an elementary school my first year. I worked specifically in a 5th grade ELA and math class. It was like kind of a combined class with 2 teachers. They did it as kind of a hybrid because of COVID. But I specifically worked with the ELA section. So 5th grade ELA.
Okay. And for those listening, when we do broadcast this, ELA stands for English Language Arts. That's what
yes.
City Year, we tend to use a lot of alphabet soup, so I want to make sure everyone understands what ELA means. And in terms of working with those young people, you mentioned it was challenging because many of them may not have had the technology to connect, to go through any type of lessons or anything like that. But so what was that like in trying to connect with students virtually, and since they've never done it before?
Yeah, so that was a really challenging time, I think, both for me and the students and those, my coworkers as well. Um, Going from a place of with a lot of structure that I would think a lot of schools have, to routines and adults that are going to push you to do your work and to do different things throughout the day, to sometimes being on your own at home and sometimes not even having internet service is really challenging. And I would say that I was able to relate to them in that way because I had challenges as well. Sitting at my desk, just going from my bed right to my desk in the mornings isn't easy. And it's very easy to keep your camera off and to lay in bed. And that is just, for those who even have technology and internet service. So in the area that we were in, which is one of the reasons why we were in that area, is because that's underserved. And so there isn't a lot of internet connection going on in that area. And there's not a lot of students with that technology because if, something breaks with the school issued computer, it's very expensive to get that replaced. And so it turns into just not having a device. And so at that point, we have students that, it's very inconsistent coming to class and they get very behind and discouraged. And then a lot of these places that we were working with were understaffed as well. So it's hard to, pinpoint these students who maybe haven't been here all week and catch them up. Rather, sometimes they have to sit kind of in the back of the classroom and just go with the flow and they don't really know what's going on.
Interesting. I'm curious, San Jose, the students that you work with, can you describe what a virtual session might look like in terms of ELA or English Language Arts? What does a session look like with a student?
Sure. So it was a very interesting setup. What we did there was they had about 45 minutes in the morning of synchronous work time with us. So we had like a morning meeting where we, said hello and did a little bit of a pulse check to see how all the students were doing. And then we broke up into individual groups. So specifically at this site, I worked with about 20 students, but two different groups. So about 10 in each group, depending on the numbers for that day. But what we would do was do a little SEL lesson. So we had about 30 minutes in the mornings with them after the morning meeting. So we do a little SEL lesson, talk about maybe some self-management or how to calm your emotions down or react in different situations. And then we'd go into some different reading lessons. So sometimes that would look like group reading. Sometimes that would look like little popcorn reading that we would do where we unmute our cameras and we would try to incorporate some games and different activities into that to make it more interactive, because we knew that we were still virtually and you're still through a screen, which poses challenges, but as much interaction as we can and active engagement while we're behind the camera. So anytime we can get up and jump around and follow along with someone as they're reading, we definitely did that. But that's pretty much what it looked like. And then they pretty much had the rest of the day to do asynchronous work. Okay. So the time that we had with the students wasn't a significant amount of time. I think that was for various reasons, but the rest of the day they did have time to get the rest of their work done.
So you were looking at ways to integrate social emotional learning with reading and literacy. I'm curious, the students you worked with, when you first started connecting with them and getting into the reading activities, and did you find that many of them had challenges with their reading levels, or did you see any increases or improvements over time, or like where did they start? And then as you continue working with them, did you see impact?
Yeah. So in the beginning, the two groups of students that I worked with were at about a second grade reading level, and we were in fifth grade. Mm-hmm. This, was especially challenging because they had other students in their class that were up to the fifth grade level and beyond. So it was really nice that we were able to be in this setting at times and to pull them in different groups. So I think that made it a lot more comfortable for the students to, get out of their comfort zone and try to read when they can. I will say that once we started seeing some consistency with the students, the grades and the reading levels definitely jumped and improved. That's something that I take a lot of pride in, and that really pushed me to come and serve at Columbus this year, because I started to see that impact. And when I started to see it, and started to see that improvement in their grades and the smile on their face when they came in and were so excited to start reading, as opposed to in the beginning when they, cameras off immediately if you ask them to read, or no volunteers in silence. It's just, it was huge. And so we were able to push a lot of the students up through different reading levels throughout that year. I had another AmeriCorps member with me in this class. So we took on a few different groups, and then our partner teacher did as well. And so we were able to get, a better ratio, adult to student ratio in that environment, and push them and, encourage them to do their best to continue to improve.
So it sounds like you were able to, make adjustments based on what the students were dealing with and going through, and working with another AmeriCorps member, another team member, and your partner teacher. So I'm curious, because San Jose is a vastly different community than Columbus.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges that you sort of were able to glean from that particular community that the school was located in? Even though you weren't physically there, what type of community were these young people coming from?
Yeah, so a lot of the people and the students that we were working with lived in multi-generational households. So especially with COVID, this was challenging because a lot of people still had to go to work, even though there were a lot of shutdowns and, COVID everywhere in the environment there. So we had a lot of students that had very sick family members. We had a lot of students who had to babysit family members, siblings during the time that they were supposed to be in instruction. And those are just two main things that, we identified as kind of challenges that we face. And then also with a lot of people in the household, a lot of students lacked solid sleep. So some of them are sleeping in different areas of the house. I had one student who was in a garage that, if it was a really chilly night, he didn't get sleep because it was cold, or if it was a really warm night, he didn't get sleep because it was really warm. So different challenges that are being faced in that community kind of stemmed from that type of environment. And I think, along with that, they have their family there to support them, which is such a plus, and got to interact with a ton of family members. But I do think that with COVID, that really just changed some of those dynamics and kind of put people in danger.
Absolutely. And when you decided to come back for a second year, what motivated you to come back for a second year?
So I think I mentioned earlier that another teammate of mine, we volunteered to open the pod at our school. So it was a select group of students who we thought would benefit greatly from being in the school. So I think these students were not really showing up to class that much. And so we got them in the classroom and we had them all spread out. We had, I think, 8 students in our one pod that we started. So this is the whole campus and only 8 students, and then a few of us AmeriCorps members and a few staff members on school. So we got to, have this instruction be very concentrated and interact with them in person. And so I kind of saw, although I was seeing, improvement with student work and with moods and morale over the virtual service that we were doing, as soon as we were in person, I saw the impact that we had made. We heard about it through these students. They were able to tell us about it. It wasn't a time that they had to unmute and share. They were able to openly speak, in the classroom and say, yeah, like I learned that a few weeks ago, because you taught me and you told me a method to manage my emotions or different things. So now I listen to music when I get angry. So it was little things like that we started hearing with these kids while we were in person that made me realize, okay, I've been a little down on myself in the last few months because we've been virtual and I didn't think that I was making a huge impact. But these students have really taken away a lot of the stuff that we have given them, a lot of the content, a lot of the, intentional conversations. And so that is really what pushed me to my mindset where I was like, I'm not done yet. I need to, let's push forward and let's keep doing this. And then also towards the end of my service year last year, we started our first year AmeriCorps members. We started being able to take on different, leadership roles and facilitate different sessions. And I loved that. It was awesome taking what I had learned in service and then talking to my team about it and creating those intentional conversations. And so that's when I knew that I wanted to apply for a leadership position back here in Columbus.
So now you're back in Columbus, back to the
Yeah,
Midwest, and now you're serving in the high school, South High School,
I am.
so the
Yeah.
South side of Columbus. So tell us about that experience so far.
Oh my gosh, it's such a different experience. These kids a lot of them are bigger than me, they're taller than me. They have these huge personalities, which is awesome. And I love it a lot. I would say that service is a little bit different here. We are all back in person for the most part. We have a few COVID days here and there, but I think that that's, dwindling away a little bit, hopefully. But so with in-person service, we kind of had to get adjusted back into that climate. And I will tell you that that has been really, really challenging for some of the students that we're working with. I mentioned earlier that going from, now I think they were there for maybe a year and a half online, give or take, that where they didn't have that accountability, where sometimes they didn't have anyone make them go to class, where it was easy to just turn your camera off and be scrolling on your phone all day, especially, when TikTok came out and you're doing all these dance moves and everything and communicating with your friends, instead of being with them in person. It's really, really challenging to bring those students back into school and to have that consistency in the classroom, and to, make sure that all the phones are put away, and to have that, those longer attention spans. So those are some things that we're dealing with now. And I'm sure a lot of schools, everywhere are dealing with similar situations. So that's kind of just been an adjustment coming back into the working world in person.
Right, absolutely. Was it like a much of a, was it a bigger shock going from West Coast back to Midwest, elementary school to high school, or you just kind of like, I'm going with the flow here? How did that transition go?
Yeah, I would say that, well, so first of all, I have some family here in Columbus. So that was really nice, because out in San Jose, I didn't know anyone when I went out there. And so I was pretty lonely, and, things were closed down. So moving back here and being able to be a little bit more in my element and go see my dad, who lives down the road, and my brother is just a little bit away as well. So being able to kind of, do some self-care sometimes and go and see some family and friends was, made the transition a lot easier. And that made me, be a better version of myself when I showed up for work. So with regards to moving from an elementary to high school, that was, I wouldn't say a shock. I think I kind of knew what I was getting into a little bit. I wanted to work with a high school last year, but it was such a big site, and I was an August start, so I was a little bit later than some of the other AmeriCorps members. So I was placed in an elementary, which turned out to be amazing. But when I said I wanted to be in a high school here, I think I was ready for it. And I would say the biggest difference is that these high schoolers will, throw things back at you, and they'll mean it, so the elementary kids, sometimes, they'll get frustrated in different things, or you'll have a conversation with them and they'll make comments that they hear occasionally, which is interesting. And you'll have to deal with that and talk to them about the different words that they've been using. But I feel like in high school, sometimes, they mean what they say. And so if you upset them or different things, or you're not seeing eye to eye about something, you're definitely going to hear that, and you're going to have to, figure out how to deal with that and still hold your ground as an adult in the classroom and a mentor, and not like, a scary supervisor. So that's definitely something that I've had to deal with here and there, and just understanding that these students are only a few years younger than me, which is so important about that near peer relationship that we capitalize on at City Year. But yeah, I would say at times the transition was shocking, but overall I've really enjoyed it, and I get along really well with high schoolers.
Okay, cool. So do you think you want to go into education, or you're going to stay with international based on your schooling on international work?
City Year has me hooked. It really does. So I think that I want to continue within the nonprofit world. I'm starting to look right now at some jobs within City Year here at the Columbus site, and within some, other sites around the US. But thinking about education, the one thing that is really challenging for me sometimes, I'm this year in both a math and an English language arts classroom. And something that I would love to do as a teacher would be implementing SEL, or social emotional learning, into classrooms. And I feel like sometimes, specifically within the school that I'm at, because of COVID and students being behind in some areas, teachers aren't always able to capitalize on integrating social emotional learning. So through that, I've kind of realized that if I want to go into education, I think I would maybe take the counseling route, is something that I'm considering, because I think I'd be able to, talk through emotions and different things with that regard. And I'm not super passionate about any one subject. So my passion really lies within the kids and just getting to know them and, hearing about what's going on and connecting them with the right resources. So I think that eventually counseling might be in my future, but right now, working with other, young adults and being those near to peer mentors to these students is what I'm loving.
You talked about the importance of the social emotional learning, and that's one thing I think, the city of Columbus has been pretty strong at, is facilitating social emotional learning in integrating it. And I think you're working on integrating it with your lessons. I think you talked about that.
Yep.
How do you think, in your experience at South High School, how do you feel? Did you feel prepared, or do you currently feel prepared and have the tools to be effective in that space? Where do you think you've been successful, or where there may have been some gaps, or you would need some additional tools to be effective with, to show some impact with SEL work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say coming into this service year, before going through basic training academy with City Year, I would not have been prepared to successfully talk through SEL lessons or anything along those lines with students. However, the training for our basic training academy is the first few weeks of training that AmeriCorps members go through to get ready to go into the schools. And through that, we had, I would say, phenomenal coaching with, first of all, learning different tools and strategies that City Year uses and the partnerships that they capitalize on to get those. And then we also did a ton of sessions with figuring out how we could implement that in the classroom in role playing and doing stuff like that. And then we've also continued that at South throughout our service year. So our impact manager, Alexia, has been amazing at, holding space for those sessions. And I've been lucky enough to facilitate a few of them, to, take what I've learned and teach some of my coworkers those things. And then we actually recently just went through a workshop of how we all brought different SEL lessons to the table and showed our whole team. And that way we're all able to take each other's lessons and continue to implement them. So I would say, to answer your question, I wasn't prepared, but I definitely have been given the tools and resources to not only use that in the classroom, but I also sometimes use some of the things that we've learned, in my everyday life. And thinking of, doing this podcast, I was thinking of a few things the other day, and the Clover model is a model where it's for developmental needs in, children and humans with human development. And one of the 4 Clovers is assertiveness. And, sometimes my younger brother is a little nervous to order his own food or go through a drive-through and different things. And so over Thanksgiving break, I was joking with him and my mom, and I was like, this is what I've been doing in work. And here are the 4 Clovers of the model. And, you need to live in your assertive leaf a little bit right now. And you need to, go for that menu and just order. And so we all joke about it now, but not only do I use some of the things that I've learned in City Year in school and in service, but I've also taken it into my personal life as well, which has been awesome.
Wow. See, that's cool to hear you say that. You talked about being, collaborative with your team and sharing different best practices, and then use it in your personal life, because that's what you want the kids to do anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And their personal interactions and things of that nature. I feel like I've asked you a lot of questions, so I want this to be a nice conversation back and forth. So how about you share some questions with me? I know you have some you want to ask me.
Awesome. Yes,
So
I do.
We'll give it a little bit and let you fire away. What do you think?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So I've been eager to ask you a few questions. I know that you once served with City Year
Yes.
before going on some other journeys of your own. So can you talk a little bit about what your service was like, or how long it was, and what it was like back then, and how it was similar to what's going on now?
Yeah, that's a great question. My service year, I right out of college, 95, 96, 1995, 1996, here in Columbus. And I served not too far from where our current office is, here in the Short North area, at a school called Second Avenue Elementary, which is right around the corner. And I also served in the 5th grade classroom. The service was quite different back then. You know, you could call it, sometimes we'll call City Year, the different iterations of City Year, like City Year 1.0. Right, so I'll say, call it City Year 1.0, because we were more of a community service, traditional community service model, where we did a lot of external type of traditional community service activities, playground builds, cleanups, graffiti removal, gardens, built gardens, those types of things. But we also had, we called them at the time flagships. So all the teams at City or Columbus at the time, the school was our flagship. So mine just happened to be Second Avenue Elementary. And I did a lot of work in the classroom. I think I had about maybe 25 kids at the time, a pretty diverse group of students, but I did a lot of work as it relates to, I spent a lot of time with the boys. I remember that distinctly. The teacher was very, very adamant about me being one of the few African-American males in the community at that time that these young men could see that was doing something positive. I hate to say it that way, but a lot of these young students did not have positive male role models in their life. So she thought it was very important that I spend a lot of time with the young boys in the class. I did connect with all the students, but I would pull students for a lot of reading groups. He talked about ELA. We did a lot of reading together, a lot of individual one-on-one sessions with some of the young boys to really figure, because they were reading, if your students were reading on a 2nd grade level, mine were probably at a 1st grade. And that was,
Okay.
you know, generous to say that. They were really, really struggling. You know, we would do reading groups, and it would sort of break my heart that we couldn't get through. I would have them take turns in the circle, that some of them couldn't get through one sentence without talking like this. I mean, so they couldn't string words together to make a full sentence, right? And it was, so we had to really work hard over the year to get them to be fluent in how to just read a basic paragraph. And we did a lot of things as it relates to, because we did all the subjects. So it wasn't just math or ELA. We would do science, we would do health, we would do math, we would do social studies. So we did a lot of stations. So I was in that realm as well. And so I did a lot of helping, standing over a young person's shoulder, helping him or her with their classroom work. From a school-wide standpoint, from a whole school, we did a lot of things. The playground was, and I'm sure, you know, in a lot of elementary schools, the playground was just a big problem at the time. And kids that bell would ring and they would get out there and it would be bloody noses, chipped teeth, sprained fingers, because they didn't know how to play together in a way that was not violent, right? So we had to come up with our own, we called it peaceful playground. And a lot of the teams did this. And so we had to come up with activities so that kids weren't fighting. There was a lot of fighting. They weren't throwing each other, you know, off the jungle gyms or the playground equipment. So I would have a basketball station or a football station. Someone else would have a hula hoop station or double dutch or chalk drawing. We would do all these different things inside and outside the school to keep kids, you know, playing well together. One of the other pieces about the service was we did a lot of stuff after school. So we didn't have after school programs, but we worked, there was a teen center that was up the street. So we worked there and worked with some of the teens in the community. There was a church we connected with, and we did a lot of graffiti removal because there was a lot of that because of some of the gang influence in that area. So a lot of graffiti on a lot of the buildings. And so we worked with this particular pastor who was really connected to the community. And then one of our other service sites was a retirement home. So we worked with some of the elderly folks and some of their physical activities. So that was kind of fun as well. And I met a World War, I think it was a World War II veteran. That was a guy that I was connecting with. And he was telling me all these stories about when he was in Europe in the war. So We did, and then on Fridays, right now you all have learning and development days where you have learning and trainings. We would have service days. And so they would alternate between training and going out and do a service project. So it was a different type of service back then, different kind of way we approached the work. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like you really, got to work with a bunch of different people, a bunch of different age ranges.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how long were you in that position, or how long were you doing that type of work for?
My core year ran the same as yours did. So we started in August, and then that core year would end in June. We would graduate in June.
Okay.
So ran the same time. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So I also loved hearing about some of that active engagement that you all did with, peaceful playground and running around, because I know that that's been super impactful with both ages of the students that I've been working with, getting them up and getting them moving, but definitely figuring out how to do that in a nice manner can be super impactful to them. I do have a question about the other AmeriCorps members that you were working with, because I know that I keep my team from last year really close. We're all over the country this year, and I'm excited to make some further connections. I know that City Year's alumni network is so vast and so massive, and we have a ton of different resources to reach out in whatever field that we want to go to. Can you talk a little bit about some connections that you made, and are you still in touch with some of your people, or what are other people up to right now?
That's a great question. My team, I can give you the names of all the people that I still know and still have connections with. My team, we started with, I think, 12 AmeriCorps members. And then, we lost some folks throughout the year, and then we added some folks, but our core group stayed together that whole time. So I think about myself, I hope they don't mind me saying their name. I'm gonna say their first names. Myself, Amber, John, Ross, Brian, and there's one other I can't remember. I said another name, but there's one other that I can't remember right now. I can see her face. So like the 6 of us or 7 of us, we had a core group that stayed together from start to finish. So I, connect with them. And one of them actually works for Columbus City Schools. She's a teacher. And so I
awesome.
talk with her, not at one of our schools, but at another Columbus City school building. So some of that, and then there's another guy, Ross, he's a teacher, I think, in somewhere in I think Milwaukee, somewhere, I think, in Chicago. But some of the other folks I still had an opportunity to connect with. I don't see them all the time, but some folks I do see or hear about from time to time, and from some of the other teams as well. So it wasn't just my team. There are folks that I still connect with. Social media, you can connect with anybody. And you talked about our alumni network. We have a very strong alumni network. And in Columbus, we have a City of Columbus Alumni Board, which is made up of one of our board members, our City of board members, who was the chair, has now moved into like the vice chair role and has passed the torch on to another recent City of Columbus AmeriCorps alum, Alex Ryan, who will be taking over. And so I met with them like a couple of weeks ago. So we're thinking about new ways to engage City of Columbus alums from 94 when we started all the way up until 2022. So I think it's going to be a really interesting opportunity for alums to be engaged in all different types of ways, whether it be happy hours or special events or all these different things they're thinking about to keep AmeriCorps members connected with City of Columbus.
Yeah, that is awesome. Just want to shout out Alex really quickly. They're the ones who I called them up to talk about some leader core opportunities that I have, and they told me that you were interested in this podcast. So that's kind of how I made that connection, and I'm excited to see what they want to do with the board. And we've already been talking about how they want to collaborate with some events that we have coming up. So I'm really, really excited to work with them.
Yeah, me too. They have fresh ideas. A lot of ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, one thing that, the reason why I asked you that question about your team was because, these service years aren't easy, and it's awesome to be, to have the opportunity to have a team that sticks with you. You build that community, you see the impact, you go through all of that together. And I have also loved from last year seeing what all of my teammates are doing this year and knowing that there's so many different avenues after City Year. That really just, excites me for my future, knowing that it isn't just one pathway that I have to go down, that there's so many amazing opportunities and that we have all of these connections because of this year that we've done. And we have, similar experiences to people from all over the world. So I really appreciate that. Thanks for answering that. And I'm excited to hear that you are still in contact with some of your teammates.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, so how did you get back into City Year? What was that like for you? And what was a reason that you wanted to return?
That's a great question. So after my core year, I did join staff as, back then we called them team leaders or project leaders, but it's a similar position to our impact managers now. So Alexia, who's your impact manager? I was the Alexia for 2 years, and I served in the Linden area at a school called Gladstone, which is not too far from like Linden McKinley High School. The building's still there, but the school has since closed down. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I went to a couple other nonprofits. I worked for like United Way, Urban League, and some other places. And then I came back about 8 years ago. There was an opportunity here to work in more of a COO operations role. I said, that's something I'm really interested in. And it was full circle for me, right? So City Year was the carrot that got me started with nonprofit, because that's been my whole career since college. And I said, well, I would love to come back and kind of see how City Year's grown. How can I be a part of it? How can I reconnect with my roots in community service and working with young folks, right? Because it's not just working with the students, it's working with, connecting with the AmeriCorps members as well. So building really strong relationships with AmeriCorps members as they go through their year of service. We have sort of a shared kinship, right? I went through it this way, you're experiencing some similar pieces of it, but you have your own experience that you can take along with you. So that's one of the reasons why I came back, and I've been enjoying it ever since. Past 8 years. And we've grown a lot since 2014. We've grown quite a bit, and I've been, thankful to be a part of that growth. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love to hear that. And it's always exciting hearing that, it's full circle for you and that you started here and this is what started your nonprofit journey. And now you've come full circle, and you're definitely a mentor to all of us AmeriCorps members here and staff that work at this site. I had a question about, let's see, how are we doing on time?
Oh, we're doing well.
Can I ask you? Okay, awesome. Just wanted to make sure. That's one thing that I've, really enjoyed taking a look at for the impact manager position was, managing a bunch of young adults who are making that impact on the students. I have had such an impactful last 2 years with working with City Year and the students that we serve. And so to be able to coach and guide some new, fresh, young adults in this journey is what I'm really looking forward to, should I pursue that. And I also wanted to say that I do love podcasts. I think it's become like a newer thing these days. I have started to listen to a lot of them. I listen to them when I work out or when I'm driving. And it's really easy to do, you can do other things and move around and are still listening. So can you talk a little bit about like what you're expecting, what you want to do with this podcast? So I know you mentioned you want to get the community involved, but who are you planning on, talking to and getting some insight from?
That's a great question. I want to go back real quick. You talked about, the impact manager, managing, other folks. And real quick, I want to touch on that. So when I got the opportunity to do it, like I said, it was the City Year 1.0, a different iteration of City Year. And I'll be perfectly transparent. I failed miserably in that role. And if I could go back and do it again, and things I wished I would have known, I think we all do that about certain things in our lives.
Oh yeah.
I think about, I came right out of the Corps. I didn't do a second year or a TL year, which would be a natural progression, or coming out of another organization to do this work. I think I was wanting to get a job and wanting to show that I could do this work. I wasn't prepared. I was 23 years old, 1 year older than many of my team. I had no idea. I thought I did. I had the wherewithal to lead others, but it took me a long time to figure it out. And I stumbled famously. I mean, I just completely stumbled. There are a lot of stories behind that. And a lot of it was on me in terms of maturity. And a lot of it was, I just didn't have the understanding of what it meant to be leading others through this service journey, right? It was just, I thought I could relate it to my core year, and it's a completely different mindset. I think our impact managers, even though it's a challenging job, I think they're much more prepared going in, and that our staff do a much better job of getting those folks in the space where they can be stronger leaders, right? So Alexia, you talked about how she's been integral in the development of your team. She came in with, I think, coming in as a core member and a team leader, she had a better base than I definitely had, right? Because she had probably a better view of what she wanted to do when she'd been to be part of this organization from a leadership level. So I wanted to start there and just, put that out there. As you're thinking about leadership within City Year, know that I didn't start out a star. I was below, I don't know where I was. I was below that. I was really, really bad.
Well, thank you for, for saying that, because I've definitely been a little nervous. I know, where my heart is and where my passions are. And so that's really leading me through this process. But it really helps to hear that, not everybody's perfect, and that, you guys have created a really great training environment and space here so far from what I've seen and heard. And that still allows for room for mistakes and for questions to be asked, and that type of room. So I really appreciate that.
And when I came back from my second year, now I can honestly say, when you talk about growth, and I can say it was leaps and bounds. I was a completely different person. I approached it a different way. I listened. I didn't assume that I knew everything, and I watched, asked questions, and learned from others outside of City Year, because City Year, we do have ways of doing things, but there are other folks that I could learn from as well. So I really look towards other mentors to help me understand what it meant to be in a leadership position, whatever that meant. So I had a much stronger second year on staff, where I could see myself, and my team responded to it in a way that was very positive at the time. The team before, they liked me as a person, but as a leader, I was poor. This time I could see myself growing, and it was like, the sky opened up. What I want to see out of this podcast, and really I was thinking about how can we be more intentional about having conversations about not just the issues of what's going on. We talk about that all the time. The kids are dealing with this, the family, we talk about all these issues. But I really love one of the opportunities to hear about from AmeriCorps members, maybe board members, other folks in the community, about what motivates them for doing this work, why they keep coming back to it, and why it's important for them, and how it impacts them, right? You talked about how these, you came back for a second year because of, and everything that you stated. But, we work with students, but there are other folks out there that work with the new immigrant community, right? So folks that are coming to Columbus, because Columbus is becoming so much more diverse. What are they challenged with? And what are some of the successes that they're seeing in those different types of programs? I want to talk about with individuals who are working with young people who are in crisis when it comes to stability, home life. So folks that may be experiencing homelessness or food insecurity as young folks. How are you connecting with those young people and doing that? And talking to leaders in the community, we're doing some really good work. Mentoring, other mentoring programs, other programs as it relates to violence in the community. A lot of our young folks are dealing with that. All around the city. How are you helping young people connecting with that? So there's all these different ideas that I've been thinking about in my head, and with other folks on staff. Who can we have real conversations with? And then I want to get a young person on here, because we tend to have these conversations without a young person in the room. So I want to get another teenager or a young person to say, hey, tell me about what you're going through, and how resources are available or not available to you. Are these programs even worth us doing? Are you taking advantage of them? I just want to understand what our young folks are dealing with, and then kind of connect it back to a City Year lens. Here's what we're doing, here's what you are doing. What are the intersectionalities of our work, right? And so talking with folks who are doing work on the ground, folks that are raising the money, folks that are being strategic, people that are evaluating the programs, people who are funding the programs. How does all that, how do we talk about those things and highlight all the good stuff that we're doing? So that's kind of my vision for these, right? They can go in different directions. They don't have to be scripted. We can just talk like we're doing now.
Yeah,
I didn't throw my questions out there. Okay.
No, that's awesome. We at South, we see a lot of work. We call it the, standing on the shoulders of giants, those who have come before us and have, done the work to make that ripple effect. And out in the mornings, when we do our morning greetings, we have several parents that, lay on their horn and are so excited to see us out there, and have older children that have gone through the city year experience and, have loved that. And just seeing that impact on the community and, hearing from some of the community members and different people that make this world of ours go round, and the world of the others that we're serving would be awesome. And I'm really excited to hear more about that on the podcast.
And it's funny you mentioned when you're doing morning greeting. I remember opening day, first day of school, I was at South. And come in, and the high school kids are a little bit too cool. They're like, why are you cheering me? It's too early in the morning.
They are.
But that they really appreciate it. They're just not gonna, they're a little too cool right now. But then the younger kids are like, ooh, this is fun. They're dressing up like cartoon characters. Who are these people in the red jackets? Oh, I remember Miss Natalie from last year. Let's go give her a hug. So we saw a lot of that. Those are so interesting. I still love those things to take place.
Yeah, those morning greetings are honestly the best. I was just doing a little reflection piece today for AmeriCorps Week coming up here. And one of the things that I talked about was the difference in morning greetings at the beginning of the year versus now. So although we work with high schoolers who are, definitely like, oh no, I definitely can't participate, in this in front of my friends and different stuff. And just their goal in the morning is just to get inside. We put on so many fun, different activities these days. One of our team members, Tanisha, has been thinking of some awesome things that we do. So we do little pulse checks in the morning where they grab a sticker and put it on a chart for us to tell us how they're doing. Or sometimes when it's warm enough outside, we'll do like jump roping and limbo contests to get everybody involved. And it's been so awesome. We've been getting a lot of the older high school kids to be involved as well. So, just making a little difference in their morning every morning, that honestly impacts us as well. It brightens our day. And so we can't imagine, coming, from being tired and cold in the morning to coming in and participating in some activity like that. We just try to make the school environment as fun as possible in that moment.
That's so good to hear that you're having, a positive experience in that space. I'm curious, really quickly, if you could share about your team. So you had your team in San Jose in a virtual space. You didn't have your family around, but here in Columbus, you can see your team every day. Physically, you do, morning circle, or you have your meetings at any point during the day. You'll connect with your team, and building team is always important. I've been on a lot of teams in my life, and the good teams really work hard to build community within the cohort. My city year team. Sasha, that was your name. Sasha, that was the other person.
Okay.
Amber, Sasha.
You got them all.
Amber, Sasha, Ross, Brian, John, Arena, Jennifer, and me. That was it. Got it. That was
awesome.
That was the Elite Eight. How do you all develop and build team within this your service year?
Yeah. So this is something that I think can be, awkward at times in the beginning. You're kind of thrown onto this team and expect to all, band together and do these cheers in the mornings and get out of your comfort zone. And I'm going to be honest, in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm, going to participate a little bit. But, in recent reflections, that togetherness and doing those silly things together and creating that culture on our team has been detrimental in getting through a lot of, the situations that we face every day together. So one thing that I love about our team is that we do community builders every week. So we try to do at least 3 a week in our after school space with just our team. So each team member gets a week and we kind of just rotate. And so they can be creative with their community builder and kind of make it their own. And so that's about 15 minutes a few times a week that we play these fun competitive games or get to know each other or do some like self-care type thing and talk about how we, do that for ourselves. And so that allows for us to see the creativity and different types of stuff that some of our teammates likes to do. And we kind of go in circles and do that. And the most recent thing that we did, we just actually had our Olympic ceremony in our after school space about an hour ago, is that our impact manager and one of our teammates created an Olympics month for us where we worked with our grade level teams. Mm-hmm. So I have 2 other teammates that also work in the 9th grade. And then there's 3 on our 7th grade team and then 2 on our 8th grade team with our team leader. And so altogether, there was 3 different groups, and we have been competing for the last month in our community building space for a little Olympics. And so This looks like we would compete with phone calls home. So that's an initiative we do to get, we build community with parents and guardians of the students at school and kind of talk about different attendance thing. And we also do a lot of positive phone calls home to do that reinforcement that your student is showing up, they're putting in the work, all of this stuff. So that was part of the Olympics that we did. We did like the games that we play in some of our team time, we would always count and tally points. So that looks like Wordle or different trivia. And then during our like learning and development days, it was, each time that a teammate shared out, they only got 1 point for sharing out. So you couldn't continue sharing out and taking over the whole learning and development space. But if you shared out once, if your whole team did, then you got a point. So it encouraged participation. It encouraged a little bit competitiveness. We got to know each other more throughout that. And then we got to work within our team, within our grade level teams. So it just strengthened that bond. And we work a lot together in these teams to, build content and solve problems and work through things. Because like I mentioned before, it's, not an easy job, and you do come across a lot of things and you have to be very empathetic and put yourself in others' shoes. And sometimes it's not, the easiest to work through alone. So this Olympics for the past month has been amazing. And we just had a little celebration tonight. I took my medal off for this because I didn't know if we'd get a chance to talk about it, and I didn't want to, just be wearing a medal. But my grade level, we got what did we get today? We got the silver. We were close. But yeah, so it was a lot of fun. And that's just, one thing that my impact manager, Alexia, and teammate Elizabeth have, come up with to make our after school space and our community building time very interactive and intentional.
Yeah, that's cool that you're finding ways to fellowship together, have fun, because you're right, the job is very challenging, right? Long day,
no doubt about that.
And you're working with students all day, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to connect with this student. The student's having a bad day, or you may just be having, one of those days, and you have to still show up for your team and yourself. I'm curious, we have about 10 minutes or so, but for a minute or so, share like some of the challenges that either you or your team may be experiencing and how you work through them.
Yeah, awesome. So I have actually a list of here because I thought through this question earlier. We've definitely been facing a few different challenges in our service, and I think a lot of it relates back to some that I mentioned earlier. So challenges and consistency with we've had some snow days and COVID days and virtual days in the building and not. So that creates a challenge, sometimes for us to make sure that we're on task and consistent. It's hard to do that if our environment is changing pretty rapidly. I would say that managing boundaries with our near peer relationships with our students is also really challenging and something that we've all had to work through, constantly and every day, and continuing to use some teach like a champion models, like using warm strict, which is a concept where you're, nice and friendly, but also very intentional and strict about your boundaries, because these students that we are working with are closer to our age than, elementary and younger middle school kids. So those boundaries do make, we need to make sure that they're set. And, boundaries do get tested sometimes, but it's, it's like we have some of our leaders always say, it's really easy to move forward with boundaries rather than create new ones after you've been a little lax. So that's definitely something that we've all been working with. I think when it comes to our role, it's really easy to think that sometimes we can be a counselor and talk with a student through some really challenging situations, especially if we've created those near to peer relationships where they trust us and are comfortable with us. We've definitely had to have some role clarity talks, and we've brought in some resources with a really great role clarity article that talked about, we're like that in between, and we need to make sure that we're staying in that in between with connecting the students with resources, because that's not fair for us to carry that stuff and to try to solve, issues that we're not equipped with solving. And that's not fair to the students to, think that we're able to solve some of these problems that they're facing. So I would say that those, along with some safety things, have been challenging in recent months. We have had some fights and some pretty serious lockdowns. So just navigating those environments and staying strong as a team together, but also having, some major debrief spaces, talking to some professionals about, how to handle those situations and how to leave work things at work, and how to, maintain a safe environment with your students at school, but also do the mandated reporting that is required of us when it is needed.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. I'm kind of going, you talked about leaving work and work, right?
Yeah.
Work-life balance. I know that's been a subject and it's come up a lot, especially in this new way of working, right? With the virtual versus going back to the office. And in our work, we have proximity is best for being with students. Like you mentioned, it was difficult doing this work in San Jose virtually, but being across in the actual space with the students is a much better, more optimal situation. So when you have your time to yourself or with your friends or family and loved ones, what makes Natalie happy? What do you do to, unwind and do cool stuff?
That's a really great question. So, first of all, I want to say that leaving work at work is really challenging. I'm going to move out of the sunlight for a second here, but so that's challenging, and that's something that I've definitely had to navigate. But I found some things that really help me, and that make me outside of work. So let's see. I'm pretty outdoorsy. So in the summer and spring and fall, when it's still nice weather, I go on some bike rides. And being back in Columbus, my dad and I ride together a lot, which has been something that we have loved doing now that I'm back in the area. When I was out in San Jose, the mountains are only about 15 to 20 minutes away. So that looked like hiking after work and going to some trips to Yosemite and different things like that. I love always like planning my next adventure and hike outside, and really just think that that's kind of like a free therapy with the fresh air and stuff after being inside all day and, being around a ton of people. Just being outside and only with a few people, I think is something that calms me a lot. In the summer, I do some water sports, which is fun. So wakeboarding has been really fun for me, and something that, is a great workout. I end up very sore afterwards, but my brother and I enjoy doing that in the summer. So that's some things that we do. And then I take up reading a lot in times of stress or times when I need to decompress. It puts me in a different world. So that is something that is major for me to kind of leave work at work. I am able to pick up a book and, immerse myself into the world of the characters in the book or what's going on in there. So and I also, learn a lot through reading, and have learned a lot about leadership and different things with City Year through reading as well. So that's kind of what my after school looks like, probably some physical activity of some sorts and hanging out with friends and family.
That's good. Yeah, you have to do those things. And whether it's City Year or any other job that you're doing, trying to find that balance. I know it's challenging. Trust me.
Yeah.
There are times I'm 10 o'clock at night, I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking of something about City Year. So I have to cut it off sometimes. So
I kind of want to throw that back at you really quickly. What is Adero like outside of City Year? Are you able to leave work at work sometimes? I know that's probably not always easy, but
I'm getting better at it. I'm a martial artist, so I love to, when I'm in my martial arts mode, I'm focused. Or if I'm coaching basketball,
awesome.
I like training basketball or being, in that space where you're like teaching others something. I'll help in the martial arts classes. I'll be teaching some of the younger kids, including my son, basketball or, doing those activities that are related to the kids. But personally, my wife and I, we like to, go to, if there's festivals, we love to go to those. We have our favorite dinner spots, like going to concerts. I'll be glad when I can get back to going to live concerts. That really brings me a lot of joy. I've been getting up every morning, or at least 2 or 3 times a week, and going to the gym, like before work. So I'm doing the elliptical, maybe some weight training. So I'm doing changing some diet things, and I do a lot of reading as well. So I tend to try to read like 2 books at a time, but I can't. I gotta stop, pick one book and just stay on that one. So I have like 3 books in rotation right now. I'm like, I need to concentrate on one. But similar, I try to get outside and walk the dog or ride my bike. During COVID, I set up my little gym in the basement, so I have my boxing,
awesome,
my bag, my other martial arts equipment and weights, so stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of music too. Anyone knows me, I'm a big hip hop fan. So anytime I have earphones in, or I got my record player back there, if you can see it, my little records, my vinyl.
Yeah.
I'm listening to my jazz or my Miles Davis or my hip hop. So yeah, so it makes me tick. So.
Awesome. I'll have to pick your brain a little bit about some relaxing music that you listen to. I'm always trying to listen to new artists and different songs that I'm not familiar with. So we'll have to have a conversation at some point.
I'll take you back to the early era, probably before you were born. I'll give you some good stuff.
That's fine. Let's go. Stuff. I'm definitely down for that.
So it looks like we're at our time, and Nat, I really appreciate this conversation. I learned a lot about you, why your motivation, your service. In China, that's amazing. And I hope you continue to, if you want to stay in the nonprofit space, continue to think about City Year opportunities here in Columbus. Definitely, we'd love to keep you local, keep that talent here. We want to always keep the talent here in Columbus and with City Year. So, do you have any other last questions before we end this session? Our first session.
No.
This is amazing. Our first webcast for the Jacket Roundtable.
No, I don't have any other questions. I think I asked all of mine. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome getting to know a little bit more about you as well. And I'm so looking forward to, hearing the other people that you have on this podcast and what your conversations will be like.
Oh, real quick before you go. So thank you for that. You want to do a quick plug for AmeriCorps Month, AmeriCorps Week?
Yes. Sure. Yeah. So AmeriCorps Week is coming up in about 2 weeks. This is where we'll be doing some spotlighting about our 8 different partnerships. You'll get to, kind of take a step into our shoes at the different schools and see the different events that we're putting on. We'll attach some pictures to that. And it'd also be an awesome time if you have any friends or family that you think would, be a great time to do a service here, get them hooked up with AmeriCorps and with City Year, and I can guarantee that they'll have a great experience.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm really excited about that. We want to keep recruiting, great folks to come and work with City Year. And so all of that information they can look at that on our social media pages, our Instagram, Twitter, all the Facebook, all that stuff. So that'll all be available.
All of it.
This video will be available as well once we post that. And I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, thank you so much again for having me on here.
Thank you for your time. And for those listening, be on the lookout for our next webisode of Red Jacket Roundtable. See you later. Peace.